If you plan to visit Lake Mead for spring break, follow the rules. Park rangers say they'll be ready to crack down on possession of glass.
The Hoover Dam is home to one of the largest hydropower plants in the United States.
Cracks have recently been discovered near Lake Mead, triggering a red alert from the United States Geological Survey, USGS, a rare and highly significant designation indicating the presence of immediate geological threats. The announcement has stirred deep concern among scientists, local authorities, and communities dependent on the reservoir, signaling a critical situation that could evolve rapidly with little warning. This discovery adds a new and alarming dimension to the challenges already facing Lake Mead, a crucial water source for millions in the American Southwest, and represents a potential geologic instability in a region already marked by environmental stress and infrastructure vulnerability. Before we start, hit the like and subscribe buttons for more exclusive news. Lake Mead, formed by the construction of the Hoover Dam during the 1930s, is the largest reservoir in the United States in terms of water capacity. It provides water to nearly 40 million people across Nevada, Arizona, California, and parts of Mexico, playing a vital role in irrigation, municipal use, hydroelectric power, and environmental management. The lake's shrinking water levels due to prolonged drought and climate change have drawn intense scrutiny for years. Yet the detection of cracks, reportedly substantial and spreading, has now shifted focus from just water scarcity to structural and geological stability. What makes the recent discovery so urgent is not just the presence of the cracks, but their location and formation pattern. Geologists have identified fissures in areas adjacent to the reservoir, particularly in sedimentary rock layers and compacted ground that are part of the structural basin surrounding Lake Mead. Some of these cracks are wide enough to be visible without specialized equipment, and initial analysis indicates active movement along the fractures. This suggests a dynamic process potentially linked to subsurface instability, erosion, or even seismic activity. These fissures are not mere surface blemishes. They are signs of deeper geological shifts. They could indicate that parts of the surrounding terrain are under stress, possibly from subsidence, where land sinks due to the extraction of groundwater. This phenomenon is not uncommon in areas heavily reliant on groundwater, as is the case in many parts of the Southwest. As groundwater is depleted, the earth above can collapse inward, forming fissures and cracks that become progressively worse if not monitored and mitigated. In this case, the correlation between declining water levels in Lake Mead and emerging geological cracks suggests a strong interrelationship between water resource management and land stability. Beyond subsidence, the cracks may also be symptomatic of tectonic activity. Although Lake Mead does not sit atop one of the most active fault lines in the United States, it lies within a region known as the Basin and Range Province, which is tectonically active and known for crustal extension. Even minor seismic shifts in such regions can manifest dramatically, especially in overstrained landscapes weakened by water drawdowns, sediment erosion, or human development. The USGS Red Alert implies that monitoring systems have registered a combination of ground movement, crack expansion, and possibly other geophysical anomalies that together signify heightened risk. One of the primary concerns raised by the cracks is their potential impact on the Hoover Dam. While the dam itself is an engineering marvel designed to withstand significant natural stresses, any structural compromise in the surrounding geology could indirectly affect its long-term integrity. The dam anchors into canyon walls and is closely linked with the geology of the Black Canyon. If cracks or ground shifts continue or worsen in nearby areas, it could influence stress distribution, sediment movement, or even create pressure points that were not part of the original design parameters. Such developments would necessitate urgent structural assessments and potentially costly reinforcements or engineering adaptations. Another significant implication lies in the possibility of landslides or slope failures. Cracks in hillsides or canyon walls around Lake Mead can eventually lead to massive sections of land giving way, especially under the influence of heavy rainfall or seismic jolts. A sudden landslide into the reservoir could displace large volumes of water, creating waves that threaten marinas, nearby infrastructure, or even downstream areas depending on the dynamics involved. The concern is not merely theoretical. Similar events have occurred elsewhere, such as the Vajont Dam disaster in Italy, where a landslide caused a wave that overtopped the dam, leading to catastrophic loss of life. Furthermore, the cracks have raised fears about contaminant pathways and groundwater integrity. In regions where the landscape fractures, previously isolated water sources can become interconnected in ways that allow for pollutants to migrate. Should industrial runoff, agricultural waste, or urban contaminants find their way into these fissures, they could potentially reach aquifers or other clean water sources. Given the strategic importance of Lake Mead in supplying drinking water, even minor contamination events could have outsized consequences, requiring large-scale remediation and affecting public health. The USGS's red alert status also introduces a high level of urgency for emergency planning and public awareness. Local governments are now coordinating with federal agencies to assess evacuation protocols, critical infrastructure vulnerabilities, and disaster readiness. Communities surrounding the reservoir, particularly in Nevada and Arizona, have been advised to stay alert for further instructions and to report any unusual ground movements or water disturbances. The presence of cracks alone does not guarantee an immediate disaster, but it signals the need for constant surveillance and the possibility of rapid onset scenarios that leave little room for reaction. Economically, the potential threats associated with these geological developments could be profound. Lake Mead supports not only water supply, but also tourism, recreational activities, and power generation. Any restriction on access, concerns about safety, or visible damage could diminish tourism revenue, especially in areas like Boulder City or parts of Las Vegas that benefit from visitors to the lake. The hydroelectric power generated at the Hoover Dam feeds into grids across the region. Any disruption caused by geological instability could hamper energy distribution and raise operational costs. From an engineering standpoint, the presence of cracks demands a reassessment of infrastructure resilience. Roads, pipelines, transmission lines, and service tunnels in the Lake Mead Basin may all need closer scrutiny. Cracks that expand beneath or around these utilities could cause damage that is difficult to detect until failure occurs. Engineers are now likely prioritizing ground-penetrating radar surveys, structural load testing, and real-time geotechnical monitoring to determine the extent of stress these systems can endure if the geological instability progresses. Moreover, this event has broad environmental implications. Lake Mead and its surrounding ecosystem are home to a wide range of flora and fauna, many of which are already under threat from changing water levels and habitat loss. Cracks and geological shifts can alter drainage patterns, change erosion dynamics, and affect riparian habitats. Species that rely on specific nesting sites or stable ground may be forced to relocate, while others may face declining numbers if the ecosystem destabilizes. There is also concern for aquatic habitats. If landslides or sediment displacements occur within the reservoir, it could stir up buried pollutants or alter water temperatures and oxygen levels, affecting fish and other aquatic life. Climate scientists and hydrologists are paying close attention to this development as a case study in the interconnectedness of climate, geology, and infrastructure. Lake Mead has become emblematic of the struggles facing arid regions in a warming world. Its dwindling water levels, driven by reduced snowpack and increased evaporation, are now potentially linked with geological stresses that were previously dormant or stable. The cracks might be interpreted as literal fault lines in the policy, management, and resilience strategies that have governed water in the West for the past century. This event underscores the delicate balance that exists between natural systems and human engineering. The Hoover Dam and Lake Mead represent an era of grand infrastructure projects aimed at controlling nature. Now, nature appears to be pushing back, reminding us that long-term equilibrium cannot be maintained without continuous adaptation and investment in monitoring systems. Cracks in the earth may be physical phenomena, but symbolically, they reflect deeper fractures in how society has approached sustainability, resource use, and disaster preparedness. Communication between agencies has now become a central pillar of response strategy. The USGS is collaborating with NOAA, FEMA, the Bureau of Reclamation, and local water authorities to synthesize geological data, water levels, and structural assessments into a unified model of risk. These interdisciplinary efforts are essential not only for understanding the present scenario, but also for modeling future developments. Predictive simulations are being updated with new data to estimate how the cracks might behave under varying circumstances, from extreme drought to flash floods to seismic tremors. Satellite imaging and drone surveillance have been deployed extensively to track the growth of these cracks in near real time. By comparing imagery over successive days and weeks, scientists can detect patterns of widening or branching, helping to pinpoint areas of greatest concern. Ground sensors embedded around the reservoir are measuring vibrations, pressure changes, and even minute shifts in terrain elevation, feeding data into centralized systems monitored by geologists and engineers 24/7. These technologies serve as the front lines of defense against an event that may escalate without warning. Community awareness initiatives are also being rolled out, urging residents and visitors alike to stay informed and practice caution around affected zones. Signs have been posted in certain recreation areas, warning of unstable ground, and access to parts of the lake may be restricted as assessments continue. For people living nearby, the appearance of new cracks in roads, driveways, or property lines has become a source of anxiety. Emergency hotlines have been activated to report geological anomalies, and local officials are conducting town halls to address questions and offer guidance. Amid the immediate concerns, there is also a growing conversation about long-term strategy. Should Lake Mead and other aging water systems be reimagined to accommodate a changing geological and climatic reality? Some experts argue that this event should be a wake-up call, prompting a shift away from centralized water control systems toward more distributed and resilient approaches. These might include managed aquifer recharge, decentralized water storage, and increased investment in natural infrastructure such as wetlands and floodplains to buffer against extremes. At the same time, the cracks highlight the importance of updating infrastructure design codes to reflect current geotechnical realities. Much of the region's critical infrastructure was built in the mid-20th century based on environmental assumptions that no longer hold. As the Earth literally shifts beneath our feet, engineering standards must evolve in tandem, incorporating lessons from new data and worst-case scenario planning. Retrofits, reinforcements, and even strategic relocation of assets might become necessary as part of a broader resilience strategy. The economic, environmental, and human stakes could not be higher. With a red alert issued and cracks actively being monitored, the region finds itself at a crossroads. There is no definitive timeline for how the situation will develop. The cracks may stabilize temporarily or continue to expand. Rainfall, temperature fluctuations, seismic tremors, or even human activity could all influence their trajectory. What is certain is that the status quo has been disrupted, and stakeholders across multiple sectors are now compelled to engage with a fast-moving situation that tests the limits of preparedness. For the millions who depend on Lake Mead, for water, for livelihood, for recreation, the discovery of these cracks is more than a geological curiosity. It is a reminder of the fragile interdependencies that define life in the arid West. It is a signal that the terrain we rely on may be less stable than once believed. And it is a challenge to reimagine how we live with, rather than just manage, the forces of nature. As investigations continue and responses evolve, the eyes of the nation, and indeed the world, remain fixed on Lake Mead, where the Earth has begun to speak in fractures. The red alert at Lake Mead continues to unfold as a geological event of historic proportions, drawing intensified attention from the scientific community and emergency planners alike. With the initial shock of the discovery beginning to settle, focus is shifting toward unraveling the deeper complexities behind the cracks, and understanding the cascading consequences that such structural shifts can trigger across a variety of interconnected systems. While the previous analyses have emphasized the significance of the cracks themselves, there are layers of potential impact that extend well beyond the immediate geography of the lake, extending into systemic vulnerabilities at the regional and even national level. The USGS, by declaring a red alert, has not merely responded to a local issue. It has effectively raised the alarm on a growing systemic fragility in one of the most water-stressed and development-heavy regions of the United States. The cracks around Lake Mead may be localized in physical space, but they expose weaknesses in planning philosophies that have long assumed environmental stasis. What has emerged in the wake of the alert is an urgent recognition that hydrological infrastructure, geological conditions, and urban expansion are deeply entangled, and that ignoring one facet could lead to a domino effect across others. Urban development around Lake Mead has surged in recent decades. Cities such as Las Vegas and surrounding communities have grown both in population and physical footprint, demanding more from water supplies, more from energy resources, and more from the land itself. This expansion exerts increasing pressure on the surrounding terrain, often in subtle but accumulating ways. When land is cleared, compacted, paved, or mined, its ability to absorb water and respond flexibly to stress diminishes. Heavy infrastructure built without adequate seismic or geological risk assessment may inadvertently contribute to local instabilities. In areas where cracks have now appeared, previous land use patterns are being reevaluated to determine whether anthropogenic factors might have exacerbated the underlying natural vulnerabilities. What's particularly concerning is the question of cumulative stress. Geological systems are seldom disrupted by a single force alone. Instead, they accumulate pressure over time from numerous vectors: drought, groundwater depletion, soil desiccation, surface weight, microseismic activity, and atmospheric changes. When these factors coincide, they can create perfect conditions for ground failures. In the case of Lake Mead, the prolonged drought and record low water levels have already altered the equilibrium between water pressure and landmass stability. Remove the weight of billions of gallons of water, and the surrounding land begins to rebound, a process known as isostatic adjustment. This rebound may sound benign, but in unstable or fractured terrain, it can trigger secondary shifts and lead to structural ruptures. Additionally, the lake's own receding shorelines have exposed geological layers that have not been in direct contact with air or weather for many decades. When protected layers are suddenly exposed to erosion, rainfall, wind, and temperature fluctuations, they begin to weaken and crumble. These exposed sections become vulnerable zones for crack propagation. Unlike slow subsidence, crack expansion can occur rapidly under the right conditions, especially when storms roll in or when groundwater attempts to refill suddenly after a dry spell, generating hydraulic pressure within the weakened zones. The hydrological implications go beyond the physical presence of the cracks. If enough material shifts in or around the lakebed or nearby canyons, it could disrupt the flow of water through channels, aqueducts, or underground conduits. Lake Mead feeds into a complex network of water distribution systems that supply urban centers, farmlands, and industries. A ground shift in the wrong location could damage an underground pipeline, misalign a channel, or collapse part of an irrigation system. Even temporary disruptions could lead to cascading failures as downstream users scramble to find alternatives. In a region where water allocation is already a zero-sum game, such failures could ignite conflicts over access and priority. Moreover, the crack's implications for energy infrastructure are not limited to hydroelectricity alone. Transmission lines, substations, and grid components are often built into or around the same geological formations that now exhibit signs of stress. The stability of pylons, transformers, and underground cables can be compromised if the land beneath them begins to shift unpredictably. If power delivery is interrupted, even partially, it could affect everything from hospitals to emergency services to water treatment facilities, which themselves rely heavily on continuous electricity to function. A red alert, in this context, is not just a geological warning. It is a systems-wide signal that redundancies must be tested and backup plans activated. There is also growing scrutiny on the ecological footprint of historical water management in the region. Lake Mead was never a natural lake. It is an artificial reservoir engineered to tame the Colorado River and facilitate large-scale settlement in an otherwise inhospitable environment. The cracks appearing now raise fundamental questions about the long-term sustainability of engineered landscapes. Sediment buildup, altered groundwater flows, and ecological dislocations are all secondary consequences of damming and diverting natural rivers. Now, as the land itself begins to fracture, those long-suppressed forces seem to be reasserting themselves in new and unsettling ways. Across academic institutions and research agencies, new interdisciplinary models are being constructed to simulate what may happen if the current crack activity continues unabated. These models integrate data from satellite altimetry, interferometric radar, hydrological flows, thermal imaging, and ground-based laser scanning. What they are beginning to reveal is that the terrain surrounding Lake Mead is far more dynamic than previously believed. Even minor adjustments in one area can induce reactive shifts miles away. These spatial dependencies mean that a crack near one hillside may increase pressure in a different basin or trigger slumping in a connected ridge system. Such dynamics are notoriously hard to predict and require continuous real-time adjustment of response strategies. The legal and regulatory dimensions are also beginning to surface. Landowners adjacent to Lake Mead, as well as commercial operators who rely on stable ground for marinas, shipping operations, and tourism, are now facing serious uncertainty. Insurance liabilities, land use permits, and federal-state jurisdictional boundaries are all being revisited. What happens if the cracks compromise public access or damage private property? Who bears the financial burden for repair or compensation? The legal frameworks in place were not designed to account for geophysical emergencies of this scale, particularly not those that evolve slowly yet threaten broad systemic collapse. If you liked this video, please give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Also, could you leave your comments below and tell us, what are your thoughts on the Lake Mead cracks? Do you think disaster is near? We want to hear from you. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.